Results suggest that MTI was associated with perceived control and MTQ6 subscales were associated with stress intensity. Furthermore, MT was associated with how stress was perceived as being a challenge or a threat, both inversely and the selection of coping strategies. Perception. This is key. I think, therefore I am. That's how I'll always be. I think that's huge. We're talking about perception here. And your perception is skewed too, because you have your own biases. Results do not support a priori prediction that esport athletes with higher overall levels of mental toughness will report lower levels of stress intensity and higher levels of control. Esports athletes may experience different types of stressors. The reason why I would agree is I think that esport athletes, because of the nature of the cognitive or mental heavy game or mental heavy emphasis in esports versus traditional, I can see why this makes sense. Esport athletes with higher levels of emotional control rated the intensity of self-reported stressor lower. It appears that only those esport athletes who reported to have higher levels of emotional control were able to reduce the intensity of the perceived stressor. It appears that only those esport athletes who reported to have higher levels of emotional control were able to reduce the intensity of the perceived stressor. We're talking about keeping this thing online, because if we think about keeping this online, what happens when emotional stressors become too high, or our perceived emotional stressors become too high, this thing gets overwhelmed, it shuts off, and now you're thinking with amygdalas. Very emotional, very fear leaning, very non-logical, but it keeps you alive. Is that great? Yes. For life, it's amazing because it keeps you alive. In esports, bad because it kills you because you make suboptimal decisions in a very cognitive heavy activity. Take that back, Nay. Amygdala thinking in life, only good in any of those 4 F's that we talk about: flight, fight, freeze, but for regular thinking, rationality, logically thinking, using amygdala to do those higher end processes of like logic and all that kind of stuff, not great. But for anything quick that you need to respond or you're gonna die, great. Positive association was observed between overall mental toughness and stress control. Esport athletes with higher mental toughness reported more control over the self-reported stressor. Control. I would also write power. These are common words that you'll see woven through all of these articles. Power, control, intent, perception. These are common themes through all the articles I've read. So, I mean, if we categorize it that way, perception, power, and control, I think it'd be very helpful to think about what points do you have control and power over, and if anything, it's your perception. This sentence is really interesting. Literature on mental toughness has described more mentally tough people as having an unshakable faith in their abilities to control their own destiny and an increased ability to remain in control under pressure, because cognitively, they're keeping their frontal lobes online. When you think about faith, what removes fear from people? I'm thinking about religion and things like that. But what I'm guessing is that what removes fear from people with faith is that they just believe. And their belief is that's perception. That's all it is. So mental tough people can control this perception of themselves. I think that's where it lies.